As you've been told, I'm Velma. I'm currently a research fellow at the Joint Data Center on Forced Displacement. I'm working on a project that looks at energy delivery models in the Kalobei Integrated Settlement here in Kenya. It is a refugee camp, and my work looks at whether incumbent business models for energy access, whether they deliver on social, economic, and environmental sustainability. And in today's presentation, I'm going to talk a little bit about sustainable business models for energy access in Sub-Saharan Africa, mainly focusing on solar energy technologies or renewable energy technologies in general. So this map shows the current levels of energy access in the global south. The lighter colors represent high levels of access, while the darker colors represent low levels of access. As you can see, most countries in the Sub-Saharan African region are covered in the dark tones, which means that there's a very high level of low energy access in most countries in Sub-Saharan Africa. And business models are among the key drivers of renewable energy growth or energy access on the continent, and they have a role to play when it comes to shifting the current scenario from dark tones to lighter tones, meaning advancing the levels of energy access on the continent. There are very many different types of business models for energy access, and I'm going to focus on a few of those that are most common in different parts of Sub-Saharan Africa, and I'll mainly use examples to explain how the business models operate and how value in terms of social, economic, and environmental value can be harnessed from these business models. So the first business model I would like to talk about is called the pay-per-service unique business model. It is common in off-grid areas in the continent. In this business model, an energy company constructs, let's say, a mini grid, a solar mini grid, and sets up the distribution network and supplies energy to customers who previously did not have any form of access. So the main goal of this business model is to provide first-time access to mostly off-grid customers. The energy company owns and maintains this system and is responsible for managing the waste at the end of life. And in return, it gets revenue from the electricity that it sells to its off-grid customers. Another business model is the rent-to-own business model, which is also common in off-grid areas. In this business model, a company or an enterprise sells solar home systems or an energy technology to customers on a pay-as-you-go basis. So the customer pays a down payment to access the system, followed by frequent installments until the entire purchase price is covered. Once the purchase price is covered, then the customer assumes ownership of the system and is responsible for maintaining it in most cases and managing the waste at the end of life. The problem with this business model, it tends to follow a linear economy approach such that the customer is responsible for maintaining it and managing the waste. And there have been incidences whereby customers complain the systems tend to get faulty within, let's say, 18 months of purchase, and they mostly end up in landfills instead of recycling centers because the nature of the business model has not set up take-back schemes. So there's value being lost at the end of life in terms of valuable metals being lost, and there's also a whole issue to do with pollution when it comes to leaching of metals that are disposed of in landfills. The next business model is called the renting business model. In this business model, an energy company rents, let's say, solar panels or portable battery kits to off-grid customers who do not have access to electricity. And in turn, the company makes money from the renting fees. In this business model, the company retains ownership of the system and provides maintenance services and is responsible for managing waste at the end of life. I would say when proposing different types of business models, the company should be careful in terms of making sure that the value that they're proposing to customers is in line with the lifestyle of their customers, because there were cases in Zambia whereby a company tried to implement this business model and the customers ended up rejecting it in preference for the traditional product sales business models, mainly because of things to do like cultural aspects regarding ownership of systems. So when trying to implement new business models, one should be very careful to make sure that it aligns with the lifestyle of the customer, and it should be done in collaboration with customer engagement so that you're not introducing a new product or a new value proposition that will end up being rejected because it does not really align well or is not compatible with what the customer wants. Another business model is called the engineering, procurement, and construction, which serves both off-grid and on-grid customers. In this business model, an energy company designs and constructs an energy systems and sells it to customers on a turnkey basis. So the energy company provides optional operation and maintenance packages, and in most cases, there's no take-back services. So the customer is responsible for handling the waste at the end of the lifetime of the systems. And the company gets revenue in terms of the engineering, procurement, and construction price. And this business model tends to follow the linear economy approach, mainly because after the end of purchase, then it's up to the customer to decide whether they need operation and maintenance or whether they need the waste to be taken back for recycling and for harnessing important metals. Another business model that is common is the leasing with power purchase agreement. In this business model, an energy company constructs a system on the property of a customer. So it could be on the rooftop, or it could be a ground-mounted system on the property of a customer. The customer leases the system for a given period of time and pays the company money for using the system. Alternatively, the customer can pay the company money for using electricity that is generated by the system. At the end of the lease period, the company takes back the system and is responsible for maintaining it and leasing it to the next customer, or if the system is still in good condition, or if the system, has spanned its lifetime, then the company is responsible for making sure that it ends up in the recycling process and the waste is properly handled. And the revenue from this business model is in terms of leasing fees or the power purchase agreement price that have been pre-agreed between the company and the customer. Another business model that is coming up in most off-grid areas is called the electrification seeds. In this business model, an owner, it could be a household or a business that owns an energy system on their property, sells surplus electricity to neighboring households and businesses that do not have electricity. So the owner of the system makes money from the sales, obviously, and is responsible for maintaining the systems and making sure that the obligation for making sure that waste is properly handled lies with the owner of the system. And lastly, another type of business model that's also coming up is called swarm electrification, which is also common in off-grid areas. In this business model, owners of solar home systems, these solar home systems are small solar panels with batteries. Well, the size varies, but they can range to small to medium systems. So owners of solar home systems that are grouped within a common geographical area interconnect their systems to create a microgrid, such that the power output from the microgrid is more than the power output from individual solar home systems. In this case, the owners of the systems can sell surplus electricity to neighboring households or businesses that do not have access to electricity, and they in turn makes money from the sales of the electricity. Maintaining the microgrid is the responsibility of the owners of the system, as well as handling the waste at the end of life. Now that I've talked about the different types of business models, I would like to talk about the factors that can affect the commercial or the profitability of the business models, be it for profit or social enterprises or just different types of business models. The first one is how attractive the value propositions are. It's very important to make sure that the value that you're proposing to the customers will receive it and it aligns with their lifestyle. As I have mentioned previously, there was that issue of customers rejecting value propositions that were not familiar to them or that they did not buy into. So it's very important to make sure that customers actually buy into the idea. And when it comes to energy, before implementing an energy business model, there's that feasibility study stage, whereby a company goes and talks to potential customers to identify if they are willing to pay for the product that is going to be introduced, and if they are able to pay. So willingness to pay and ability to pay are two different things, and it helps to determine the price of the product. It helps to determine the price of the product, which in turn translates to if the enterprise will be profitable, and also what costs will come in when it comes to implementing this business model. And once the business model is up and running, ensuring that there is sustained demand for electricity in this case is very important, because in most off-grid areas, there's the issue of, if you're introducing a system to people who previously did not have access to energy, you find that their energy needs are mostly for lighting or charging the phones or powering small appliances. So there were concerns that the energy demand from the systems from customers did not warrant the commercial existence of some of the business models. So it's very important for customers, for companies, or for enterprises to work with customers to maintain them in the long run throughout the lifetime of the business models, and also make sure that the customer retention is a priority, but at the same time they are consuming energy from the system, so that there's that the consumption and demand is long-term. It's not just a one-time thing. And lastly, the affordability of the product that is being offered. It's very crucial to consider that, because there were cases whereby customers reverted to previous energy sources before electrification, mainly because they perceived the price of electricity to be high, and there were cases where they say that it increased their household energy expenditure. So working with customers is very important. That's where the willingness and ability to pay comes in. You work with customers to identify a price point that they would be comfortable to pay for that energy, so that you're just not producing energy that's not going to be, which in turn affects the commercial viability of the business model. And lastly, I'd like to briefly talk about some of the barriers that enterprises face. The first one is called the missing middle. In this case, we have companies that are too big or too large for proof of concept funding, and they are too small for project finance funding. So they're somewhere in the valley of death, struggling to get capital to implement their business model. And the solution to this problem is to look for catalytic investments. There are some investors out there like Acumen that are providing what is called patient capital. That's the capital. It allows for the risks that come with companies in the valley of death, and it's also flexible in terms of the payback period. It can allow for long payback periods so that companies can be able to get on their feet and make some money out of their work. Another barrier is unproven business models, which is also common in off-grid areas. In this business model, you find that commercial lenders tend to shy away from business models that do not have a track record or do not have consistent financial flows. So instead, the solution to this is, if a company or if an enterprise does not get funding from a commercial investor, it's to look for alternative pathways of investment. For example, we have angel investors who are always willing to work with companies that are starting up. Another thing is to make sure that there is a proper customer engagement, so that if you have an attractive value proposition, and the customers are willing to buy it, then your company will be able to get that track record that the commercial investors are looking at. And lastly, I've already mentioned this. There's this problem of unpredictable energy demand, especially in the off-grid areas. So I've already mentioned this previously. There's the issue whereby customers in mostly off-grid areas, they have very small electric loads that do not warrant the commercial existence of some of the projects like mini grids. So in this case, the company or the enterprise has to work with partners to try and stimulate demand for electricity through things like productive use of electricity for income generation. For example, if, let's say, you have one of your customers is a shop, and the energy demand from the shop is low, then there's this issue of working with the customer to provide technologies or solutions that consume higher amounts of energy. For example, there are cases whereby customers are being supported to put up welding infrastructures or cooling technologies, just to to get that demand. In turn, the customer benefits from the revenue from the productive use of electricity, and the company that's providing electricity also benefits because the average consumption and the average revenue per user also increases. So there's that issue of working with partners and with customers to try and stimulate demand, just to make sure that the business model does not fail.